Welcome back to another edition of Big in Biz with DiViz. I'm Craig DiVizzio, and my guest today is Jackie Blakely. She is the Director of Engineering, Procurement, and Construction at Southern Power Company. If you are an aspiring leader, or you're already in leadership, and you're wanting to really hone your skills with the art of coaching, stay tuned. She's got some great tips that I'm sure are going to help you out. Welcome back to another edition of Big in Biz with DiViz. I'm Craig DiVizzio, president of DiVizzio International, and my guest today is Jackie Blakely. I'm really excited to have her on the show. She previously attended one of my workshops years ago, and since then, boy, has her career flourished. Let me tell you how good she is. When she worked at Exxon in their offshore construction division, she won the award for technical support of Louisiana gas plants. In working for Entergy, she received the American Gas Association Hero of the Hurricanes Award for developing the first mutual aid agreement between gas utilities during Hurricane Katrina. She was the first woman from Southern Company to graduate from the Construction Industry Institute's Executive Leadership Program. And she's the co-founder and advisor of Alabama Power's I Can Girls in Engineering program. She is currently the director of EPC, and that stands for Engineering, Procurement, and Construction at Southern Power Company. Since leading that organization, her team has completed a record 15 solar projects and 12 wind projects across 12 states, along with gas, fuel cell, and battery storage projects for Southern Power. All of that contributing over $1 billion of income to the company and expanding their renewable fleet to over 4 gigawatts. So you may have to explain that because I'm sure people go, how big is a gigawatt and how much power is that? Her BS is in mechanical engineering from the University of Alabama, Roll Tide. She's a certified project management professional. Who am I talking about? Of course, Jackie Blakely. Jackie, thank you for being on the show. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me, Craig.
In the form that we asked you to fill out for the show, you mentioned that you wanted to talk about coaching. Make a case for why it's so important for us to talk about that now in 2021.
Absolutely, Craig. I have to start with a tip of the hat to the construction industry. You said that all the way through my entire career, that is where my passion is. And really because of my dad, who was a career welder. He once told me that the best welder does not necessarily make the best foreman. So you may be the best at your craft, but it is that leadership component that is important to leading people and being able to coach them well. So, for those of us in a technical field, we've at some point in our career probably heard someone say, it doesn't take technical people to lead a technical organization. And what that really means, I've learned over time, is that leading and coaching is an art and it's not a science. And really your approach has to be customized to the individuals that you work with and the team that you have responsibility for. So to me, that is the case for it all, is that every leader has their own view of this, but that's really where the work is to be able to lead well, is that art of coaching.
I'm going to see if you agree with me on this. My sense is historically, going back 10, 15, 20, maybe even further than that, the people who got promoted into leadership responsibilities was the best welder. That was, he was or she was the candidate to be the leader. that's who got promoted. And as you articulated already, oftentimes they didn't make a very good leader because they didn't have the leadership skill set. They didn't have the talent for doing that, maybe not even the inclination to do that. And do you see that changing now? Are leaders being better equipped to go into leadership and not just selecting the best skilled craftsmen to move into that leadership position? Has that changed in your view?
I have seen a migration toward the people who are making the decisions about who's ready for leadership, looking at those soft skill components, right? Over the last maybe 10 years, we've been talking more about emotional intelligence, right? And that there's actually a quotient that you can measure someone's capacity for emotional intelligence. There's the diversity, equity, and inclusiveness that someone brings that must be a part of that equation in order to not just determine who the right players are to put on the team, because we can use sports analogies all day here, right? The 4 and 5 star players, you can assemble a team of 11 of those or whatever, but if you can't determine how to make them all work well together, then you're missing opportunities. So absolutely, there has been a migration into as much about the technical, but absolutely the soft skills that are necessary.
Yeah, I just shot a video for YouTube titled, "Will You Coach Me?" And it's interesting, Jackie, that you mentioned the sports analogy, because in that video I said, my whole career has been involved in sports as an athlete and also as a coach, and how much I learned about true leadership from sports, that people who haven't necessarily been in sports, but they want to be in leadership, my suggestion was, you need to read some of these books. You need to listen to some of these interviews with some of these coaches, because as a coach, essentially you do all the preparation of your team, and then on game day, you do a little bit of involvement, but it's basically getting an assessment of how well did you coach them. Now they're out there on the field doing their thing. It's going to reflect on, did you do a good setting them up for it, or did you not do a good job preparing them for that date?
You're absolutely right. I think this also kind of comes around to, as a leader, you're the organizational architect, exactly what you're talking about. As the coach as well, you are expected to be able to put the right people in the right position to be successful. And that really brings the beauty of the diversity and the art of inclusion into this, that as leaders, our role is to search for the best fit for everyone to be successful. But when I bring it around to kind of more of the technical engineering construction, we all know that we shouldn't be forcing a square peg into a round hole either. And so when it comes to people, you have to spend the time, because it is work, to get to know really what are their strengths individually, what are their natural tendencies, how are they wired, and create opportunities for them to be successful. Back to sports, you might have, been recruited as a quarterback, but you might end up being a tight end. So you got to customize that approach, because in order for everyone to bring, the new term, their full selves, best selves to work, getting the most out of everyone, at the end of the day, you want folks to be ultimately satisfied with their ability to achieve through their work and be seen as successful. So exactly what you're describing, that's less about, the technical capability and more about a leader's ability to tune in where they need to be tuned in.
As I read your bio, I was looking at it and going, okay, 28 years of leadership experience. So she's been doing this a while. And I'm thinking, rightly or wrongly, 28 years ago, there weren't a lot of women in construction. Now, that I may be wrong there. So I'm thinking, am I going to be talking to a maverick today? Is she a rebel? How did you get into that field? And I'm also interested in, How did you determine that you wanted to be in leadership? What was because I know that we've got listeners out there going, I don't know if I'm good for leadership or not. I hear what Jackie's saying. I got to have this other skill set or whatever. But, talk a little bit more about what incentivized you possibly to get into leadership, recognizing it's a lot of work.
Indeed. And so I'll start with your first kind of, observation. 28 years ago, I would even say 10 years ago, there still are not as many women in construction as I think I'd like to see, indeed.
Right.
But certainly that many years ago, and where my career started in offshore construction, I was in many cases the only woman involved on that team. So I have to really go back to my wiring as well as my rearing. I witnessed really the value of hard work. My mom gave me the grit. My dad gave me the wow factor of seeing what he could create as a constructor. And I thought, that is just phenomenal. I want to be a part of that. And so that's really kind of where the interest came from in terms of construction. But then in the way of leading, at least in my case, Craig, I have always been that person that can't stand by if I see something that needs to get done, or if I see something that could be done better, or really more in a servant role, that I don't want folks wasting their time if they don't have to. And it really became more of a behavioral sort of migration of, I just jumped in and go, let me help figure this out. I quite frankly did not know I was leading anything. But at the end of the day, I was, whether it was bringing folks together that maybe had thought about, we ought to fix this for quite some time, but maybe just didn't have the opportunity. And all of a sudden, you just become the head of something and you didn't even see it happening.
Yeah, I remember as you were speaking that I did a lot of teaching in Mississippi Power, and with the line crew over there, they had a book that they were passing around, the title of which was, You Don't Need a Title to Be a Leader. So it kind of sounds like you started out in a individual contributor role, really functioning as a leader, and then probably getting comments from people saying, hey, you'd be great in this leadership role because you're kind of already doing that. Correct?
That's right. And when people are trying to coach their teammates well, regardless of your level, there's this phrase that's used often, lead from where you are, right? Take the opportunities you see, because it is important. There are plenty of people that think in a way, like you said, trying to debate, is this a specific choice that I have to make? And does it mean that I am taking on some specific check boxes I need to go learn how to do? At the same time, I will say to you, Craig, it's important for me for people to understand how much work it is to lead. And it is important to be self-aware and to, assess yourself as far as, is this something I need to take on? And am I wired for it? Because leading does put you out front. The buck stops somewhere. Someone has to be willing to say the answer with a period at the end, even with some uncertainty behind it. So it's an extremely important capacity to evaluate well, and not take it for less than it is, which is it can be daunting to some.
Yeah, my last guest, we were talking a little about mentoring and talking all about the conversations that to do a good job in leadership need to be ongoing. This is not a, let me touch base with you when I've got some work to give you, let me touch base with you twice a year for some type of mandatory performance appraisal, but this is a back and forth, real ongoing relationship that we have. And there are some people who are My experience, just, purely not interested in doing that. I had a guy in one of my classes one time say, Craig, I'm an engineering manager. And I, in addition to helping all of my people manage their projects, I've got my own, like a working manager. I've got my own construction projects. And he said, with the stuff that I've got to do, I don't really have time to help them out. If you had that person, if you recognize that in your organization, what would be your message to that person? Because I think there are lots of people who are saying, man, and I think this is a great idea. Can't we have like a 6-month trial period? Let me try this leadership thing out. Now, I know it's not always possible. Let me try this out and see if I like it. And, no harm, no foul if I decide it's not for me. But this guy said, I'm so busy, I don't really have time to manage my people. In essence, I don't have time to coach them. What would be your message to your organization about that feeling or sense or behavior?
Well, first off, from what you just described, it's unfortunate there are situations that way. But there are opportunities, though, which we have taken advantage of before, which is let's start out with an informal leadership capacity. You're not necessarily responsible for that person's performance management, but you are an informal coach/mentor, and you are providing feedback, but not having the full responsibility. I would much rather give someone, if we have the luxury to do so, that opportunity to demonstrate. It's a two-way proposition here. How do they feel about it? And how do we see them responding to that responsibility? Because when we leave those blind spots in there, when we have overloaded people to the point that they can't do the leading, there are things, once you scratch the surface, that you are going to want to know about sooner rather than later.
Right. You've been watching Big in Biz with DiViz. I'm talking with Jackie Blakely, the Director of EPC at Southern Power Company. We'll be right back after a short commercial break. Stay tuned. The number one reason why most people are unsuccessful is that they hate doing the work. Man, I don't even want to think about getting prepared. For those of you who are really struggling with, I don't really want to do the work, I've done most of the work for you. I've made the process easier. All you got to do is pick up one piece of material and everything that you need is there. I guarantee it. I've got thousands of students from my classes who've been successful using this approach. I know it works. You need to up your game. You can do it, but you got to figure out what's the best way for me to do it. You need to start preparing now. Everything that I knew over 40 years is in my book and in my interviewing skills online course. Everybody's got a favored learning style. All you got to do is watch it, read it, listen to it. See ya. And we're back, and I'm talking to Jackie Blakely. Jackie, we were talking about coaching in the first segment. I wonder if we could get a little bit deeper into that. What do you see as the keys to being a good coach?
Every leader has their own view on this, but for me, Craig, I can boil it down into what I'll call 4 major areas. And trying to help folks remember, I put them into an acronym that actually spells the word team. So T really is for trust. E is for engagement. A is for accountability. And M is for model. And I do want to absolutely explore some of those with you, of course, because for me, when I think about, the foundation to any relationship, singularly, plurally, is trust. And it is the leader's responsibility, the coach, to build it and maintain it with your team and with your stakeholders.
What's
that
the,
really, yes.
what's the biggest challenge to doing that? Because I know that a lot of employees may not be as excited about having you know a lot about them, so really significant things on which we build trust. And so they may be going, yeah, let's just keep a little bit of distance here. I feel more comfortable with that. Talk about that a little bit, about how you bridge that with people who are not necessarily interested in building a lot of trust.
I'll tell you, my secret sauce, at least, is transparency and vulnerability. That's whether it was with my own child and with my team, is when I'm completely honest and I'm able to be vulnerable about things that I'm being challenged with, within reason, obviously. Right, professionally as well as personally, and letting people get to know who you are and why you are the way you are. And it kind of is that equation of being trusting of your team as well as trustworthy with those personal relationships. That's really been where I've seen other people who maybe normally would be a little more closed off actually open up.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying it is the responsibility, if you're wanting as a leader to build trust, for you to put your stuff out there first, for you to be transparent first. And that kind of ties in with the modeling behavior. I'm going to show you the way. I'm willing to do this. Now, are you willing to do this? Correct?
Absolutely. And you've kind of moved into the engagement piece of this, the E in team, which for someone like me who's naturally an extrovert and very energetic, okay, you also have to balance the right kind of energy with your team, with individuals. Again, this is has to be customized, and use your professional intuition, what I call that spidey sense that only comes with experience, right? On how much detail do you need to be in by individual. You know your team, who has experience, who you lean on, who needs more of your input and involvement. And that engagement it requires recognizing the obstacles to your team's success, some of which are out of their control. And it's your responsibility to work to remove them. The more they see you in action, the more they continue to bring to the table, professionally, personally, because they know that you will take that, treat it confidentially, and use it well to their benefit.
Yeah, and as I'm listening to you, it's reminding me of what we covered a minute ago, and that is, this is a lot of work. You're talking about customizing, and of course, you know that in my performance enhancing feedback course, I talk a lot about this. You can't have a broad brush stroke and use the same message with everybody. I mean, obviously, when you're talking to the whole team, you have to use an approach, but individually, you want to tailor those conversations to what you know that person will respond to the most. And but it takes me back to, it's like, man, if I'm going to become a brand new leader, I'm signing up for a lot of work. And yeah.
If you're going to do it well, right? And so you just kind of segued into the A for team, which is accountability, right? The trust, which is the foundation, must be there in order to create the ability to expect and drive top performance of your team. Because your team has to be able to receive sometimes difficult messages and constructive feedback for their personal development. And employees have to see how their role connects with higher level objectives so that they can work with purpose, right? And outcome, that they are fully invested and engaged.
I'm smiling, Jackie, because you hit on something that, in my experience, a lot of people in leadership have not done as good a job explaining as they could. And that is the why. Let me tell you why we're doing what we're doing, how it contributes to the bottom line, how it contributes to meeting milestones in this project. Now that I understand how my piece fits in, we're going back to the word, I can get more engaged because I realize the purpose of what I'm doing, not that I'm just putting the nut on the bolt and I don't know what happens to that as it goes down the line.
That's right, and I'll take it another step.
Okay.
Is I personally, every year, involve my team in creating our department's annual strategy. We establish the mission and vision together. We connect with, okay, let me explain to you the higher level objectives here, but it brings the buy-in and commitment that you must have, right? And we do that in a very structured way. It's a fun way. We know that we can't define and control everything, but at the end of the day, we come out with the things that we can. And that list is shorter, and that becomes our goals that we can control. So it's extremely important for everyone to understand the why and become a part of creating the how.
Your advice to an individual contributor who comes to you and says, Jackie, my manager, I heard you on a podcast and you covered a number of things. And my manager's falling short, let's say, to be nice, on some of those things. What would your advice to them be in terms of, because I like to think of it as a two-way street where managers and leaders are saying to their direct reports, let me tell you what I'm holding you accountable for. I just shot another video saying, are you holding your manager or your leader accountable? And do they know what you're holding them accountable for? And have you had that discussion? Because everybody, it's like, you owe me something too. If I owe it to you, this is a back and forth. So if you've got an employee coming to you and go, my manager's falling short, help me have a conversation with them. What I found in terms of communication is lots of people struggle with, I don't even know what to say. What would I go to my manager and say? So what would be your advice to them in terms of helping them get from their manager these things that anybody has a right to expect from their leader?
Absolutely, Craig. I will share, unfortunately, my own circumstances previously. There are leadership systems that are broken, that people do not know and are not aware that some of those issues are out there. One way I have handled it in the past is just because I report to someone does not make them my only coach and mentor. I have attempted and failed, regardless of being specific about here's what I want feedback on, here's what I need help with. And I have organically gotten as much, if not more, out of other people that I don't formally report to on paper. So I encourage people to use their network as well. Besides, sitting down and going, here's some specific things when I'm presenting or when I'm carrying on leading a meeting, I would like your feedback on. It helps people. I'm going to use a term here, but there's quite a bit of lazy leadership out there, Craig. So we got to help. If we're going to prop them up, then that's all we can do is say, for an individual contributor to say, these are the specific things I'm working on. But please don't limit yourself to thinking that that's your only way of getting better or getting better guidance, is go to others as well. When
I think about leadership, and you've been in leadership for a long enough time to have seen it change, how is leadership changing now with whatever training and that you're seeing come down the pipe? How is it changing and moving in a direction where we've got less and less of that, we call it lazy leadership, or people that are not really doing the role the way we'd like them to?
I'll go back to what we spoke on earlier, which is a little bit of the softer skills of this. I do see, particularly in what we might call a tough field of construction, so to speak. There is quite a bit more of a focus on recognition of people and of teams, really working to win that recognition for your team and know that, your organization is working hard. Look for early wins to excite them and energize them. It really builds your personal credibility when you do that. And I've really seen that be more of a focus. Let's celebrate. Let's publicly, acknowledge, particularly in construction, having people call out how great they're doing, in a safety scenario. Whereas before it was just, some things were taboo. And you were just expected to do your work and work hard. So I think that has, energized things a bit and helps mobilize your team too, when they see that they are seen as far as how hard they're working.
Do you see a difference in maybe the character or personality or skill set for leaders who are successful in construction but may not be, let's say, in an engineering or operational environment, or vice versa? Or if I have a passion for any of those areas, the skill set is essentially the same? Or is there somebody, because what I know of construction, when I've had people in my classes in construction, it's pretty brass tacks. It's pretty no holes barred. They don't mince their words. I mean, it's straight out. And sometimes when I see those people moving from construction into other areas of the company, they struggle some. So any thoughts on people trying to make transitions or skill sets that are actually better for one area than another?
Yeah, having done it myself, there's absolutely an element of political savviness in a corporate setting that is not a filter in construction.
Right. Yeah.
And that political savviness really comes down to filter. It comes down to situational awareness. Who's in the room? Who's speaking? How are decisions made? It's not for everyone. Kind of back to the reality of this, and the constant, process that has to be running in the back of your mind, that there's implications to things that you say, and choosing your words carefully sometimes, is not for everyone, but it is a reality as well. And some people, it's kind of like, folks that do split their time between corporate life and going to the field. It's kind of like saying, I love going in the field because I get to wear my jeans. Back in the day, I get to also shed a bit of the, maybe tap dancing occasionally that has to happen. And I can just go straight and say what I need to say.
Right. Going back to the acronym, team, trust, engagement, accountability, modeling behaviors. Anything else as we're closing out today that you want to say to either prospective leaders, people who are considering going into leadership, or some of those who are already there, who as they're hearing this saying, I need to maybe get up to speed a little bit more on some of these. Any last thoughts, Jackie?
I would just offer, from a general career management standpoint, I think the earlier you recognize that you are your own publicist, if you are not advertising your value, if you haven't done your own self-assessment of what is my value and benefit in your current role and other roles you aspire to, no one is. Do not fool yourself that there's a mentor or a sponsor that is performing that function for you. I really feel like your tips here are self-assess your value regularly, identify those examples, translate them for others. Back to that being politically savvy, you do need positive peer relationships to help you get this done. This is not just up and down, this is cross. And recognize and leverage the broader organization, right? And the leadership without undermining the chain of command, of course. That there are key stakeholders in the organization. Always, as we say, we don't get anything done on our own. We get it done through others.
Right. I love your advice. And it sounds like for the prospective leaders, at least, looking into this maybe a little bit more than some people have in the past. What does it really take to be a great leader? Maybe I need to find a mentor who is a great leader, who has the respect of everybody, and really pick their brain to see if I've got what it takes and I've got the energy that I want to devote to this. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And I will just say, which is part of that responsibility of mine and others in the capacity, demonstrate the values that others can relate to and want to admire and emulate. That's the leaders that when I see things that I go, there it is. I want to make sure that in that situation, I would be able to handle it in that right way. So that's what's extremely important. And at the end of the day, you work for your team. It's not the other way around.
I love it. I love it. I'm hearing myself say that very same thing many times. That's why I'm agreeing with it so much. So many people have that the opposite way. You absolutely work for it. It is a privilege and an honor to be in leadership. There's a responsibility that goes with that, and you've clearly identified how that has worked well for you in your career. I applaud you in your career, and I want to thank you, Jackie, for being on the show today. It was a real pleasure talking to you, and I'm sure that a lot of the listeners are going to really benefit by the points that you laid out.
Thank you for having me, Craig.
My pleasure. And that's it for another edition of Big in Biz with DiViz. Thanks for watching. Till next time, stay cool, have good thoughts. See ya.